Good morning. The Committee on Education and Labor will come to order. Welcome to everyone, and I note that a quorum is present. Committee is meeting today to hear testimony on examining the policies and priorities of the United States Department of Education. This is an entirely remote hearing, and as such, the committee's hearing room is officially closed. All microphones will be kept muted as a general rule to avoid unnecessary background noise. Members and the witnesses will be responsible for unmuting themselves when they are recognized to speak or when they wish to seek recognition. If a member or the witness experiences technical difficulties during the hearing, please stay connected to the platform. Make sure you're muted and use your phone to immediately call the committee's IT director, whose number was provided in advance. Should the chair experience any technical difficulties or need to step away, another majority member is hereby authorized to assume the gavel in the chair's absence. In order to ensure that the committee's 5-minute rule is adhered to, staff will be keeping track of time using the committee's field timer, which appears in its own thumbnail picture and will show a blinking light when time is up. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, opening statements are limited to the chair and ranking member. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. 2 days ago, 19 children and 2 educators were gunned down in an elementary school in Texas. Regrettably, this is too common an occurrence in this country, and according to Education Week, we have suffered 27 school shootings already this year alone. We could have prevented a lot of these if elected leaders valued children and families more than guns. And instead of time and time again, Congress has failed to act to enact any sensible or widely supported proposals to respond to these strategies and prevent another one from happening. Today, I call on each of us as members of the Committee on Education and Labor to do everything we can to protect schools and communities from gun violence and to ensure that this most recent tragedy will be the last. I therefore ask everyone to join me in a moment of silence to honor the students and educators who have died and their loved ones and the entire school community in Texas. Thank you. Secretary Cardona, thank you for being with us today. We look forward to hearing your testimony on how we can help students recover from the pandemic and succeed. Today, 99% of our schools are open for full-time in-person learning 5 days a week. The safe reopening of America's public schools would not have been possible without the President's American Rescue Plan, which delivered the largest one-time federal investment in K-12 education in our nation's history. And importantly, this funding was distributed using the Title 1A formula, so the greatest resources went to the communities with greatest need. There are expenses that schools need to open safely, like fixing dilapidated or improperly working ventilation systems. This is an airborne pandemic. Making sure they have more transportation. You can't pack as many students on a bus during an airborne pandemic. You have to hire counselors and nurses during the pandemic, PPE, things that were not in the budget when the schools began before the pandemic. And so to open safely, they needed the resources, and the American Rescue Plan provided the resources so that schools could open safely. Schools have used these relief funding to cover the cost of implementing school-based COVID-19 testing, upgrading ventilation systems, and hiring additional staff to reduce the capacity in classrooms and buses. And importantly, the rescue plan has also required at least 20% of the funding to go towards strategies to address learning loss and closing achievement gaps. The achievement gaps, as everyone knows, were exacerbated during the pandemic. To do so, school districts in my community and across the country have extended school days, hired counselors, and offered comprehensive after-school and summer programs. Schools are also using this funding to develop innovative programs that are helping students not only make up for lost learning, but also prepare for the modern economy. Last month, I visited a new STEM resource lab in my district where elementary school students we're programming robots to maneuver an obstacle course. This is just one example of how investments in students and educators can create new opportunities in schools that help all students succeed. But regrettably, for too long, not all students have had the support they need to reach their full potential. For example, in our K through 12 schools, Black students, boys, students with disabilities, and others face harsher disciplinary practices at disproportionately higher rates. In our institutions of higher education, there continues to be a prevalence of sexual assault and harassment and a lack of accountability of the institutions to safeguard the students. So I'm pleased that in response, the Biden-Harris administration has collected data as an initial step to help inform schools in addressing disparities in school disciplinary practices. And I'm looking forward to seeing a new Title IX rule that will improve protections and support survivors of sexual harassment and discrimination that can be done without violating fundamental due process protections for the accused. Finally, the federal student loans are critical. Federal student loans are critical to expanding access to the benefits of a quality higher education for all students. However, over the past few decades, it has become increasingly clear that our students are taking on a lot more loans than in the past, and that our student loan system must be improved to fulfill its promise. This is why the Biden administration has taken historic steps to forgive more than $17 billion in debt for 725,000 borrowers, and to ensure that our student loan program puts borrowers' needs first. And since the beginning of the pandemic, we have ensured that borrowers of federally held student loans were spared from making payments on their loans and accruing interest on them. The administration has also provided temporary changes to expand access to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program during the pandemic. Already, the administration has been given $6.8 billion in debt, covering more than 113,000 loans through this program. This includes $233 million in debt forgiveness for roughly 4,000 borrowers in my home state of Virginia. Simply put, the Department of Education under the Biden administration has taken historic steps to get us back on track. However, we know that there's more that still needs to be done. To that end, I look forward to hearing how the president's budget proposal will strengthen our continued progress to help every student reap the lifelong benefits of a high quality education. So in addition to whatever the administration is going to do with loan discharges, we need to make sure that we significantly increase the Pell Grant to restore it to its historic value, eliminate or significantly reduce interest on loans, make the public service loan forgiveness and interest-based programs more generous, promote short-term Pell so that you can use your Pell Grant for job training programs as well as college courses that lead to a degree. We need to make sure that those are just the beginning to make sure that college is accessible to all. So thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your time today and your work in support of our nation's students. And I'm now pleased to recognize the ranking member, Dr. Fox, for the purpose of making her opening statement.